Okay, so I'm here. My name is Joanne. I'm here today with Donna. We are creating a little podcast that is aimed to language instructors in Canada who are teaching in ESL Link programs and following the Canadian language benchmarks as outlined by the Canadian Centre for Language Benchmarks. And we're focusing here today on literacy learners. So that would be foundation literacy learners or CLB 1 and 2 literacy learners. I am a language instructor in the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board. And I'm here today with Donna, who has been teaching literacy for quite a long time, several decades, I think, Donna.
Maybe.
Do you know how long it's been?
No, I don't really, because often I was doing a high level in the afternoon and literacy in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it was yeah.
Yeah, but
Maybe like 18 years.
yeah, so a couple decades of experience teaching literacy learners. So we want to capture your knowledge so that we can share it with each other and also with any new literacy instructors who are starting out.
Yeah.
So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
So one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is a question that I often get in my daily life from friends and family asking me about my job, and one of the questions I get is, how do you teach English to people who don't speak a word of English or very little English, and especially if they can't read or write? And I don't know if you get that question, but how do you answer that?
Yeah, it is really, really tough. You use a lot of body language. I've become actually quite a good drawer and drawing on the whiteboard, and yeah, so I use those two things. I use my whiteboard for pictures that I can access, and yeah, and yeah, for the
Yeah.
reading and the writing, that is the hardest part. And the reason why literacy is so hard to teach is that we are not illiterate. And we were when we were, entering school, but we don't remember that. We don't remember all the things that we learned. Therefore, we don't know the things that we had to learn. And so to really understand where the literacy student is coming from is probably the hardest thing. And yeah, and because we are a literate society, we don't have much experience with it in our own lives. Maybe if you had a child going to school, some of the things are going to be the same, but they speak the language, which is, such a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah,
But it
that's
is tough.
yeah, it is tough, isn't it?
Yeah,
And there's definitely a marked difference between literacy learners who are learning English as a second or additional language compared to literate learners who are learning English as a second language. So,
yeah,
someone who can read and write in their own first language,
yeah,
learning English is a different type of learner than somebody who's learning to read and write for the first time
yeah.
while learning a second language. So
So
how
one
are
of
those two different?
so the main thing I think is literate learner knows their own grammar structure. So they know their verbs, they know that word, whatever it would be in their language, but they understand that classification of language. The same thing with nouns. They understand, oh, how do we make plurals? How do we make future, past, all of those things. They're very aware of their own language. And so then it really becomes, let's find the code in English. How do we make plurals? Okay, this is the code. And so there's that. They are used to doing, shall we say, paperwork, worksheets, and being able to figure out, okay, so what do I have to do in this paper? and where do I write the answer, for example, or, you know, basic things like that, that if you haven't been to school, you don't really have a clue about, you know, paperwork. Like activity work is what I mean. The other thing that really makes them different is they can read and they can write, and therefore they can translate. So you will see, you know, level 1, 2 regular literate student will have, though, you know, in their language, all of the new words so that they can make that translation. Literacy students can't do that. And so it really, really makes it difficult. It even makes it difficult for them to, say, have a dictionary book, which sometimes teachers do, because they don't know how to write that word in their language. They know it, but they only know it orally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are good examples of differences, and I've noticed that as well. Things that we take for granted, like growing up in the society here in Canada, where most people are literate, there's certain things we take for granted, like how to orient a paper and how to use a table, for instance,
Yeah.
and things like that. That are we kind of might forget that
Yeah.
that stuff needs to be explicitly taught.
Yeah. And
To
even
literacy learners.
things like categorizing, you know, categorizing things that are the same and understanding which one is different, just that, that technique, and things about logic. So when I was a first beginner teacher, I was doing, I thought a good exercise to review food words. And the exercise where there were 4 words and you had to circle the word that didn't belong to the group. And at that time, we didn't have that literacy designation, even though those students were in the class, and sometimes largely the whole class. So I was doing things like, all right, so we have apples and oranges and bananas and milk. Nobody seemed to have a clue. All right, so we work through it. Number 2, the same thing. So those 2 ideas, no, we had to do the whole exercise together, because the concept of categorizing and using logic as to what would be different, you know, these are taught things. We think they're
Mhm.
just human skills, but they are things that we learned in elementary school. Really, I grew to have a big appreciation for elementary school teachers and all of the things that we teach that we don't know are taught things. You know?
Yeah, that's right. I've noticed that as well, like critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
This is something that we're taught as a matter of course in our education system here in Canada. And so someone who maybe hasn't been through that system or hasn't been to school at all or very little
Yeah.
actually didn't really develop those skills in the same way. And so it's kind of that's something that as language teachers
Yeah.
we aren't really trained in school, like how to teach that, but it is
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
we do need to
Yeah.
figure out
We
how to teach.
we in our training we're taught about the language, and but not really, this. So here's an example of what I use this envelope for numbers, and I have all of the numbers for 1 to 100. Students get introduced to them gradually, but let me see the numbers. Yeah, so the numbers 1 to 20 are in orange. The next set of numbers to 50 are in yellow, and the other numbers to 100 are in pink. And I have to tell everyone every day, we do it on Thursdays, we always do numbers, that, okay, now put them in order, put them in groups, and then do this group first, and then do this next group, and the next group. And it's not just one time. I have to explain that idea, it is, you know, many, many, many times. Yeah. So that whole categorizing thing comes into play in every aspect of our classroom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great tip, Donna. Something for us to remember. And yeah, I've noticed too with literacy learners that they really like to think in a concrete way. Like abstract thought is
Mm-hmm.
kind of difficult. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, they can more easily identify a word to a picture, an actual photograph, than they could to a symbol, for
Yeah.
instance. And so,
Yeah.
even bridging the gap between photographs and symbols is something that some
Yeah.
students need to be taught and need to practice.
Yeah. 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 The main thing is you really can't assume anything with literacy. You know, you have to, when you see blank stares, you have to think back, okay, what's missing?
Yeah, and dig deeper, right? It's like getting
Right,
even
exactly.
lower,
So did
even
you
lower.
get this? Did
Yeah.
you get this? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Okay, so how do you start with a new foundation literacy student? So that, like a new student walks into your class, you don't really know what they're capable of yet.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding out, like, at what level to start them
Right
out at?
on. Yeah. So there's two times we have entry. So say at the beginning of the year, and that, you know, you have the whole class. So really on the for the first week or maybe even two, I'm just doing a range of activities to judge people's writing ability, printing or whatever, and their knowledge of letters and their speaking skills. And I'm just doing, sometimes they're too difficult. Sometimes the things are too easy, but I take that whole week. Maybe I'm doing things about school and introducing yourself, but all of those are assessment days and tasks for myself. So that's kind of, you know, thinking about the whole class at entry in September. But then when the other individual comes with one student, that's really tough. Um, and as things usually go, they come on like the last few days of the theme, and so other students are really quite, you know, proficient in that. Yeah. So I usually sit them beside, if there's somebody of their own language, I sit them beside there to give them some help. I just say, you know, do what you can do. And again, I'm doing that micro observation of the one student in the group of the whole. I never really ask them questions to put them on the spot unless they want to ask, they want to answer. And it's just a continual, you know, assessment until I see where they are in
Mhm.
terms of the classroom.
And so when you talk about assessment for new students coming in, you don't mean like the formal
Test or
PBLA
anything.
assessment, right? It's
Yeah,
more just like, you mean just sort of checking out through
what they can do. Yeah,
observation,
yeah,
what they can do and what they still need
yeah,
to
yeah.
practice. Is that right?
So, for example, writing would be, you know, the start of the day. Today is Wednesday, September, whatever, 4th, 2005. Um, we are in Donna's class. Yeah, room 311, something like that. And then the students are copying it in their book. And then I can see all of their, you know, what are their, how fast do they write? You know, what is their penmanship like?
Right. Like, is it on the
Spacing, all
line?
of that. Yeah,
Is it on the
exactly.
line? Are there
Yeah,
spaces between the words? Did they
yeah,
form the letters
yeah.
correctly
And
and
so,
stuff?
you know, you do that a couple of times because, of course, the first time there's nerves and whatever, but you do that a couple of times, and then you get kind of an idea of, you know, where people are. And you will always have, even in a foundations class, quite a
Mm-hmm.
difference between the person who's kind of writing for the first time and then other people who are writing more quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. One of the activities that I do on the first day of class is have students make a little name tag for their desk, and they have to write their. I ask them to write their name, and that allows me to see who can write their name
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
who can't. And if they can't, it's fine.
Mhm.
I'll write it down on a paper for them to copy. And then I can also see, are they able to copy their name,
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
paper to
Yeah.
onto the name tag. And then we might play a little game later on, maybe a few days later, once everybody's comfortable and knows each other's names, to put their name tag in a basket. And then they kind of come up and pick one name and try to identify the first letter and see if they can match it with the correct student in the
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
And so that's another way to check with reading, like can they read the name? Can they identify the first letter? Or are they not able to do that at all? And so that's one way that I'm kind of checking. It's not a formal assessment or
No,
anything like that, but
exactly. Yeah.
just kind of checking to see
Yeah.
what can they do.
Yeah.
So,
And the other activity probably you're doing before that is the oral, saying, can they say their name? Can they say, my name is, and from Sudan? And then I think it's really important for literacy, uh, because usually the language level is low. At least that's been my experience lately, that they really get to know at least the other people's names, because they're not able to really bond by speaking other than in their small language group. But if you want them to have a sense of class, solidarity or belonging, then they have to know other students. And so we do a lot of those quizzes where they introduce themselves, and then the other person has to say what they heard about the other person. And then, yeah, and all of those quizzes you can do. So
mhm.
who's from Sudan? How many students are from Sudan? All those kinds of things. But it's amazing how long it takes for them to learn each other's names. And it is because at a higher level, they can do really quite a lot of speaking individually, personally. But that is harder in a literacy class if the language level is low in speaking and reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking.
And also, a lot of the students who end up in those classrooms are coming from war-torn countries and are
Mm,
experiencing trauma
yeah,
or,
yeah,
poverty or health issues and things like that, which
yeah,
can also affect how
yeah,
easily they can remember things, right?
yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah.
So what are some activity examples? So examples of activities you would do. I know we already kind of talked about a couple of activities.
Yeah.
Maybe like, because I know that where it's recommended that we start with oral speaking and listening first with literacy students
Mhm.
before we dive too much into reading and writing. What are some examples of little activities that you would do with a new literacy class?
So I think the thing that I'm always conscious of is I can't give too many papers. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe one or two papers per class, per, yeah, classroom period. And so I really rely on a lot of other kinds of activities that are not paperwork. Um, yeah. And actually, students have said, oh, just little paper, and
Yes.
imagine yeah. So
So what
anyway,
kind of things? What kind of
so
things would you use other than
yeah,
paper?
so one of the main things, okay, I do kind of two things. I do vocabulary for the themes, and so this is an example. Um, Say if I was teaching health, which I usually do, I have a set of cards here. The students have all of these pictures themselves, and we've gone through them. They have them in their binder. But then I've cut them up and I've made these cards.
Oh, can
And
you hold them up a little bit so we
yeah,
can see?
can you see them
Okay,
there?
yeah, nice. So
Yeah,
pictures
yeah.
glued to
Now,
cardstock and
yeah.
laminated.
Now this one, I've written the word. I've used these for like 10 years. But sometimes in literacy, I have no word. So you can do it either way. And if you have the word it's help, you know, for the higher levels, because they can be reading the word as well as learning the vocabulary. And so
So when you say no word, you mean it's just a picture with no
yeah,
text?
with no text underneath it. Yeah. And so then we've reviewed these, whatever, and then one of the activities is to play fish, the game Fish, and that is you know, people sitting around in a group, and maybe they get 5 cards per student, passed around like you do in the regular kind of card game. And then they pick up their cards. There's cards in the middle of the table, the unused ones. And they have, say, they have their cards here. And I'd start. And I would say, you know, Amir, do you have a head? And I allow them to see that, so that they, if the other student doesn't understand, they can see the picture and find the picture in their hand. And then, yeah, and then the answer, yes, I do, no, I don't. And all of that, do you have that structure is very useful. And it starts out rough and gets better and better and better and easier for the students. Yes, I do, no, I don't, or simply at the beginning, yes and no. And that card game, that fish game, I use all through the day in different ways. So I would do this, say, for this theme for health. I have also the symptoms, because I want them to be able to identify the body part that's hurting or affected, and also say, you know, I have a fever, I have a cough, whatever. So I have 2 sets of cards. This is the symptoms and this is the body part. So these are the 2 games that we're playing pretty regularly. And then, yeah. And so that's really a speaking listening game.
And
Yes,
it's a great skill building
yeah,
activity to build
yeah.
up the vocabulary for health as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, exactly. Because if you're going to speak, you need to have those words and those
hmm
concrete words. So that would
So
be
I'm
fish game.
guessing you have card decks for all kinds of, like, for
Yeah,
food and
food.
different categories of vocabulary.
Yeah, food. I have school. I have the house. I have, let's see, health. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, things
Probably
from a
numbers
store.
for
Yeah.
things from a
So
store. Yeah.
that's it. Yeah. And then there's always numbers, but I usually have a special numbers day, more because I think numbers are incredibly important and used a lot in our society. And I will forget to do it if I don't designate one day for myself. So more or less the whole day, but maybe half a day. And I have, again, cards like this, which is, this card game is 1 to 20, but I have 1 to 100, and maybe, like, not all the numbers, but say 60, 65, 70, 75, and then the numbers 1 to 20. And this is building. So as they get better, they go up to a higher card game, or higher, yeah. But then when they perfected the numbers, then I have money. And this is, I do a lot of money stuff, and, you know, food buying, and, you know, clothing buying,
hmm
and that kind of stuff. And then I have the same kind of game, and it's, can you see that? It's
I
just,
can see the tip of it. Maybe put it up a bit
okay,
higher.
yeah, it's just prices, you know, $1.75, 75 cents. Yeah. And, oh, sorry, I think when you're making the cards, you have to make 2 of the same. So that,
Yes. So there's a matching
yeah,
pair,
so there's a
right?
matching pair. The idea
Exactly.
is to collect the pairs. And actually, there's a lot of fun and interest in how many pairs each person has. They count it out themselves. They then, by the end of the year, we can say, all right, so who had 2 pairs, 4 pairs? How many pairs did you have? 5 pairs. And then who's the winner? and all of that. But that's like,
And that's all using numbers as well, right?
yeah,
Even just
yeah,
ordering who has the
yeah,
most pairs and who
yeah,
has the least pairs.
and going mathematically to say, that idea of which number is larger than another, which
Mm-hmm.
is, logic and math skills. So all that, and if you had a higher class, I would use this money thing here, which is, much bigger.
Oh, higher
Right.
amounts.
Higher, more difficult vocabulary. So 69.99. And that 99, I mean, really, I'm very annoyed, but they see it everywhere. They have to know it. Not that easy, but we have to teach that because they'll see it all the
It's
time.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
Then in the, so that's sort of the numbers and the themes, and then the letters. And you use so I have a set of these for every student, and they are these are the capital letters, A to Z, and we say we start with these, and they put them out on their desk. There is always a model on the board, or they have the sheet on there. It's never, they're not expected to know all the letters, but they are starting to look at the model and then formulate the model on their own desk.
Mm-hmm.
And this is great because some people are more advanced and others are slower, and they're working individually. They can be helping each other, and it can be, quite, I would say, at least it could be a 45-minute activity doing that. And as they get better and better at doing it, once they have all the cards out and they read it to me, they read to their neighbor, and then we do the listening part. And that is, I would say, okay, N, everybody pick up N and put, and so everybody identifies from their letters, which is N. And so that is kind of the listening part of the activity.
So each student or group of students would have their own
I
deck of letter
I
cards,
finally
right?
figured out it's better for everybody to have their own. And these are not, these are not glamorous things. I constructed them myself. You can use those index cards and cut them in half and do that. And yeah, but I've found that their own set is better because they can work according to their speed and their knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So I introduce, it could be upper or lower case, it doesn't matter, but just start with one is what I do. Start with one because really, you have the 26 letters, and then you have the lowercase, which is just like another whole different group of letters. And so then they learn the lowercase, and then the subsequent activity, and I'm talking about like a few months, maybe, depending on the students, then matching. So big L, small l. And it's quite a concept when you think about it. That they have the same sounds. You can use the uppercase, you can use the lowercase, and it's important, really important, because on the computer, the keyboard is in uppercase. Most of our writing is in lowercase, and so if they cannot match those letters, then
they'll really struggle.
they
Yeah.
won't be able to.
Such important skill building activities,
Yeah.
really so important.
Yeah.
And it kind of leads us to our next question in terms of like when it actually does come time for formal assessments like a PPLA assessment, how is that different? Like assessing literacy students is very different than assessing
Yeah.
mainstream students. And what does that difference look like?
So I kind of think about assessment as, a reflection about what you're doing in the class and what you are learning. I want to know what they know, and they want to know also what they know. So really, if I'm spending quite a long time on numbers, which I think they need for basically locating their name, to be able to read their address, to spell their name and their last name, and even maybe look at the date and find out what date that the doctor's appointment is on. So I'm not striving for, reading novels or anything, but I'm talking about what skills do they really need. So the problem is, it might take the class maybe at least a month to do this. It might take them another couple of weeks to do this and this. So within 2 to 3 months, they've learned uppercase, lowercase, and the matching of them. So the real trick is, how can you show that in the required real world sense? So, as you said, can they write their name? Can they spell their name? And, that is a real world task. Those are things we do, but they are quite, shall we say, simple to teachers.
Seems simple,
Thinking that
exactly.
that is a real assessment.
Seems
And
like
so you
it's
have to
simple
keep,
to us, right?
yeah,
But it's actually a very long and
yeah,
complex road
yeah.
to get to that point.
And sometimes you don't have, they're continually getting better, but you want to have them succeed before you give them any kind of
Mhm.
a real world assessment. So it could be like 2 months before you come up with any kind of an assessment on
Sometimes,
just their
yeah,
letter.
depending on the
Yeah.
assessment for
So you
sure.
do 2 weeks, and then you do one test, which is asking them to spell their name, or you dictate your name and then they write it, something like that. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, and so
that
there's
is,
still a lot of copying, like at
yeah,
foundations level, there's still a lot of copying, which can be a valid assessment too, and
yeah,
even just
yeah,
learning how to, can I copy my name from my ID card into the right place on a paper,
yeah,
would be a valid assessment, but it still might take time for them
mhm,
to be able to find their name on the ID card, for
yeah,
example, amongst
yeah,
all the other, words and letters and
yeah.
numbers that are on there.
Yeah, but I like to have sort of assessments that are for me, so I know. So they're not maybe they're not called real world assessments, but I would have the student, put out the letters, and then I would ask them different letters, uh,
Yeah,
and
so, like,
and I'm
observation for
evaluating them.
observation
Yeah,
records.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
absolutely, and we
Yeah,
need so much of that. I had a new teacher once told me, she said she was doing a real world task of telling students the price of something, and the students had to respond by giving the correct, money with a kind of a fake money kit, and she said, "We spent so long on this, and a lot of students weren't being successful, and she couldn't understand why." And I just asked, I said, "Well, do they know how to do math?" And she said, "I don't know. I didn't check." And this is actually like really important. That's something that we take for granted, right? We just assume we're just teaching the language and then everybody knows how to add,
yeah,
three
that's
quarters
right.
together, like three
Yeah,
times 25. It's actually, not only not everyone has learned numbers, or
yeah,
depending on where they're from, they may not have had the opportunity,
yeah.
to learn math, either. And so this means learning numbers, learning addition, subtraction, multiplication, being able to count by twos, by
Oh
fives,
my
by
gosh,
tens, by
yeah,
20s.
yeah, yeah.
So there's so much there.
Of
Like you
basic
have,
stuff.
to
And
just be
even
able to
the
get
idea
students
of
to listen
bigger
and provide the
than,
correct money.
less than. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
yeah,
some are more than others. Maybe
yeah,
copying your name, from one place to another can be a quick assessment to get to, but then something like, if you have students in your class without a background in math, teaching students how to listen and provide the correct money, that may take a really long time.
yeah,
I mean, how long did it take us as kids to learn our multiplication tables and be
yeah,
able to count by, twos and
yeah,
fives and tens? So it's just
yeah.
something to remember, that it's not
And
that,
they
to us
and
it
they
may
may,
be
yeah,
simple,
and they
but
may
it's
not do it in their own language. They may not know how to do those things in their own language. So it's not a question of language. it's
No,
also the
it's
skill.
background.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I had last year in my class, I had a number of Afghani women from rural areas in Afghanistan who had not been to school and didn't have to manage their household money or anything like that, and just trying to teach them, the basic math to be able to add nickels and dimes and quarters or
Oh,
bills,
yeah.
to do that was a big task, and I don't know if if I did it completely in the time that I had. They
Yeah,
probably still need more
yeah,
time to master that too. So
yeah, 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 for
yeah.
sure.
Okay, so what about the higher level students? And by higher level, I'm talking about 1L, 2L.
Yeah.
So these are students who've progressed out of foundations, and
Mhm.
they're maybe in a mainstream 1-2 class, or they might be in a literacy designated class, but they're starting to do those CLB 1-2 tasks, but they still have literacy needs.
Yeah.
So how do you start teaching them? Let's say you were assigned a 1L, 2L class, or maybe you have a mainstream class with some literacy students in there.
Yeah.
Um, how yeah, how would you teach them, or how would you
Yeah.
approach it, or what kind of activities would you do with them?
Yeah. I think it would be harder if you had only a few students in the regular class. But if you had 1L, 2L, then I would again resort to phonics, but I would, we'd be talking about the sounds. We'd be uh, identifying the sounds, is more or less the consonants and the short vowels, but those, and then doing phonetic dictations where I say maybe a 3 letter or can progress up to a 5 letter word, say the word sat, and listening for those sounds, identifying them. I start with the first letter, uh, doing that, and then we progress to maybe 3 letters, and we're doing it like a dictation. I'm writing it on the board. If students aren't getting that, they at least copy the word. Um, and then it could move up to even a word like plant, where every word is phonetic, but it's 5 letters. And so we do dictations like that. I always try to use words that I can show them the picture or they know that picture and work on that. So you can do, I do, phonetic dictations, and and then you have the sight words. So say, you're teaching them to identify and write the pronouns, I, you, he, she, and then making small sentences that are phonetic. So she has a cat, for example. And so that would be the next level of building after they can do a word. And then we're doing sight words sometimes, and then putting it all together in a sentence. And I still think phonics and sounds and funnily enough, hearing it and writing it seems to be easier for them than reading it. And using that sounding out technique, you remember we learned that in probably grade 1, that
Mhm.
sounding out technique takes really quite a long time if they don't know how to read at all in their language.
Yeah.
If they know how to read even a little bit, it'll be faster. But if they don't, then that, I don't know what it is really, but it's like they know the sounds, they can identify the sounds, they can write the sounds, but then to do it in reverse seems to be more difficult. So, working on that. And
Yeah, I found that too. Some students will jump to trying to guess the word, which isn't bad in itself because there is some guessing that is part of that. But it's really important to kind of dial it down and teach like that habitual approach of sounding things out,
Yeah.
kind of decoding, which
Yeah.
is something that has to be explicitly taught and repeated over and
Yes.
over and
And
over until they realize, oh, I'm not supposed to just
yeah,
see the word and know it necessarily. And
that's right.
if I
Yeah.
see it and I don't know it, I can sound it out.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
and that idea of we're doing this because we're learning how to read. We have to do this to learn how to read. So these are not just ridiculous things that Donna's thought up as crazy activities. We're doing this because this is how we're going to read.
Mhm.
And write that connection between all of these. We've been to school, so we know that there's a building process. We know that, we start here and we build up. But I think if you've never been to school, you don't have that idea
Mhm.
and an understanding of, okay, so we need to actually know these before we can do other stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah.
And so, what about speaking and listening for those levels? Any suggestions of how to approach that?
Yeah, well, I think it's really, really important because that's going to get them. That's how they're going to really get by is orally and listening. But it is hard to teach when you can't write it on the board and they can't read it. So, say for example, a dialogue. So you
Mhm.
have a little dialogue and you have this person from Walmart who says, "Hello, can I help you?" And you say, "I'm looking for a skirt," which is a word that we've been working on, you know, with these cards.
Mhm.
And we can, and then we write over there. That's dialogue. But if you can't read that dialogue, really you have to memorize it.
Mhm.
So you have to do that dialogue. You have to decide on a really good, useful dialogue,
Mhm.
and then practice it a lot in groups. I'm the Walmart person, they're the buyer, and all of that, and practice it and practice it and practice it over quite a long period of time. And this year I started having, uh, say, for example, students evenly sitting on one side of the table or the other table, the other side of the table, and they're working in pairs. So number one and number one, and these people are the customers, and these people are the Walmart people, and they practice the dialogue. And then they change. This row moves over, they have a new partner, they practice again. We do that a lot at the higher level. And this year, I actually had quite a lot of success and enjoyment on the part of the students doing that dialogue like that.
Mhm. Great idea.
That being said, there were some students who, when I wanted to practice the dialogue together, as the assessment, they didn't really get the idea of dialogue, of role play, that I'm this and that. You should still keep doing it, but know that that is going to be a difficulty. They can either understand that it's a role play, and maybe they can't.
Yeah.
And so, you just have to, or maybe they don't get it now, but maybe they get it on the next theme, and,
Yeah,
continue
that's
to,
something I've noticed as well, is struggling with the idea of, like, that's kind of abstract thought too, like thinking it's not me, I'm
yeah,
pretending to be someone else
yeah,
now, and that
mhm,
person, that role might change as the role play changes. And then also another thing I've noticed is even just turn taking, um, is something that sometimes has to be explicitly taught. Well,
mhm,
I'm pretty sure everybody does understand that turn taking is involved in speaking in any language, but like sometimes when it comes to, they might not understand where those breaks are, or where the
yeah,
turn,
yeah,
when, at what point does the turn taking happen.
yeah.
And even in something as simple as oh,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, even something as simple as hi, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. How are you? I'm fine, thank you. There's three turns there.
Yeah.
And that's something that I find has to be really explicitly taught for students to understand. And so, right, do you have any tips for teaching? How do you approach the whole turn taking
Wow. It
thing
is
in
so tough
dialogues?
because
Yeah.
at the beginning they just parrot everything you say. So you say good morning, they say good morning. That's great. How are you? How are you? I'm fine. I'm fine. And so the idea of that being a conversation is kind of lost. It's just
Yeah.
really repeating.
How to break
Yeah.
from the rote learn it's almost like the rote learning, which is an
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how it
Necessary.
starts, by just
Yeah.
repetition, to actually
Yeah.
generating new phrases
Yeah.
or new
Yeah.
words, right?
And
Yeah.
I think and again, it requires so much repetition. So in the card game, for example, we're always using the vocabulary do you have. So we're learning that there. And then say we're doing family. Do you have children? So I said, yeah, same. And so then because really they're memorizing everything, right? They're not being able to read the dialogue. And although they seem to want me to write it, but anyways, they're not reading it and writing it. They have to memorize it. And so, yeah, that takes a long time. And all of us should try to memorize a little dialogue in another language. And
Right,
you don't
right. So
use
you can get a feel
my
for
name
it.
is,
Yeah.
I'm from Canada. Like, just remember that when you're kind of on the spot. It's really, really not easy. And if you can't write it so that we can read it, then it's
Yeah.
really difficult.
I
More,
do write it as well, not because the students are able to read it,
yeah.
because what I do is I'll put different colors. For example,
Mhm.
if it's how are you, I'm fine, thank you, how are you? I'll put, one
Mm,
person's text is in blue, the other person's text is in red, and I'll also put a little picture of the,
yeah.
you can see like this is, this is Ali. He's a man. He's going to ask the question. This is, Fatima. She's a woman. She's going to answer. And so they kind of are,
Mhm.
hopefully,
Yeah.
and then maybe I pay two of my stronger students to demonstrate,
Absolutely.
doing it
Yeah.
in real
Yeah.
time, so they can kind of see it as well, and to kind of try to show. And so then that way, when they're practicing in pairs, I can kind of correct them by showing like, oh, are you saying the red one or the blue one?
Mhm.
And to kind of help them understand that there's different, uh, not that they don't understand turn taking, because
But if you
obviously
don't
every
understand
language
the
has.
language, then how do you know, is it a question or is it an answer?
Yeah, or
You
when
know?
does at what point does the turn end and the next one begin?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think your advice of trying to learn a little dialogue in a foreign language is a really good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It
think
keeps
that's a great
you,
idea
yeah.
for teachers, to just get
Yeah.
a feel, to help them.
Yeah.
Then they can understand, what do I need to learn to know in order to do this? And then I can then use that to
Yeah.
help my students learn.
Yeah. So I
Mhm.
I have a good memory of that. I was teaching a student who was having a really hard time saying her numbers, even 1 to 10, after quite a long time. And so one day we were one on one, and I said, okay, you're going to teach me the Arabic words for one. How do you say one? And I found out she doesn't really know her numbers in Arabic all that well. But anyway, she got those numbers. And then, I tried to repeat them. And honestly, I couldn't do 1 to 10 because I wasn't allowing myself to write it down at all. I was just doing it from memory. I could remember a few of them that I could connect up in my mind with something else. And the next day, really, I only knew one, which I had already known, Hamza, which is number 5. And only because that's also a name, a boy's name. And I knew that name. But otherwise, and it's not actually Hamza, but it's close to. So so it is really, really tough. And, you have, without that reading component, we don't realize how hard it is.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
love this translation story, and it just actually reminds me, like back in the day, they used to say, and like I was in French immersion, it was the same thing, like don't speak your native language, don't speak English in the French class, or, I was told as a kid, and as an early teacher, I remember hearing that as well. But I came across somewhere along the line some newer research, maybe at a conference or something. I heard that actually it is beneficial to do your translation into your first language, and it's actually
Yeah.
helpful for second language learners to do
Yeah.
that. And since I've heard that, I've encouraged more translation in my class. And we have a lot of fun in my class where when I teach them something new, sometimes I'll get them all to teach me that word or that
Mhm.
phrase in their language. So I'll go around and kind of say, well, how do you say that in Somali? And how do you say that in Pashto? And how do you say that in Arabic? And then I try to say it, and they think it's hilarious
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
try, but it also gives me that similar kind of feeling that you were saying is like, you know, one of the feelings that new instructors sometimes I hear from literacy teachers that they feel frustrated at the pace of their students learning or how repetitive it is.
Yeah.
And I just tell you, just reverse it,
Yeah.
once or twice a day,
Yeah.
and then that will get rid of that feeling. Because I'll tell
Yeah.
you, some of the phrases that my students were trying to teach me, I was trying to spit it out and it was all garbled and they were laughing and they had to repeat it so many times
Yeah.
for me to even sort of get it. And it helps to put into perspective the
Yeah.
demands that we're putting on them, like
Yeah.
how much language we're giving
Yeah.
them for 3 hours a day, every day.
Yeah.
And it
Absolutely.
just puts into perspective that actually they're doing great. They're
Yeah.
probably doing better than I could in some
Yeah. Yeah.
cases, right?
Yeah, you're
So,
absolutely right on that. Yeah, I like that idea. I do it a little bit. I think this year I'll do more. I like that idea of reviewing each word in their language, or the main
yeah, maybe
vocabularies
not
that we
every
want to
yeah,
know. Yeah,
I don't do every word. I just do
no,
maybe a couple of times
yeah,
in a day. But
yeah.
it also helps me to see if they understand what
What
it
that
is we're
thing is.
doing. Because if they don't, if they spit out the wrong thing, there's usually another student in the class that speaks
Yeah,
their language that will correct them and say, no, 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 it's not that.
yeah,
It's this. And so then it helps to correct any
yeah,
misunderstanding that me as a teacher, I might not have even been aware
yeah,
that there was a misunderstanding happening. So,
yeah.
mhm. Yeah, so okay. What about multi-level classes? This is something probably most boards are faced with, I think, is, dealing with funding considerations and student numbers and all of that. We often end up with classes with two or even three um, levels of students in the class, and can be really challenging. What kind of strategies do you use to deal with that?
Yeah, I've been fortunate that I usually only at most have had two levels. And I separate them, but they're not aware. So I'll have the foundations people at the front row and at the front of the class, because I need to keep my eye out on them much more. And then the second row or third row will be um, the level one group, the literacy one. And so physically, that keeps me aware of who's who. And then I just try to do the same exercise for them and then harder for them. They can, the foundations people and the 1L, they can do the same thing. The foundations will take longer, and then have step two for the second group. Then also working in groups together, I find they enjoy it and it's good for them. And yeah, and helping one another, sort of, yeah, two parts of the class, and the foundations maybe are working on that. And when I'm with the foundations, the level ones are helping themselves. But it is tough. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love those ideas. For me, I kind of have like three approaches to that, really. And I mix it up because not everybody likes. I find not every student likes every approach, right? So, for example, one is that I'll sometimes pair the higher level students with the lower
Mm.
level student.
Mm-hmm.
So you have kind of like a mentor and a mentee relationship between the students while they work on something. And I find, most students appreciate that, but sometimes the higher level students at a certain point, they don't want to spend all their learning time mentoring, right? So
Yeah.
then my second approach to deal with that is to separate them into two groups. Usually I have one on each side of the classroom, like I'll call them group 1 and group 2 or something like that. And I'll just have them working on a similar themed activity, but at different levels. So then that they can work in a group with people at the same level as them.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I do is I always have my desks in a U shape if I can in the classroom. And then that way I can sit in the rolling office chair and while they're working on something, and then I can roll around kind of one by one to offer them individual tailored feedback, like for each student, and because
Yeah.
I go around kind of systematically, it also reduces the amount of like, teacher, I need help, because they know I'm coming, they know I'm going to get to
Rolling
them.
along.
Yeah, I'm going to get to them eventually. And so that allows me to kind of provide feedback like for that particular student's level.
Yeah. Yeah. I also use the higher level as the model. So when we're doing anything, they're the first people that I will ask. And I'll have them do it. So then we see, okay, what do we have to do in this activity? And then they see, maybe 5 or 6 examples of a correct one. And then I will take the strongest of the next level and work down. So then the weaker student or the newer student will have had many times of listening to the question or whatever, and then the answer. So everybody is a little more successful that way.
Yeah, I do that as well. And I find that really successful in the class because the higher level students that are the examples, they feel really proud to be doing it correctly, as a demonstration. And then also the spotlight doesn't get put on the weaker students to kind of single them out or anything. And like you say, they've had a lot of experience observing how to do it before it gets to their turn.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important strategy to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not easy in any regard.
No, certainly literacy teaching is not an easy task.
Yeah.
But it can be really fun. I really enjoy it, and the students typically are so grateful. Yeah, they're really appreciative. It's really rewarding.
Yeah.
Work.
Really. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what kind of soft skill that kind of leads us right into our next question, actually, is like, what kind of soft skills are needed for teaching literacy? Like what makes a good literacy teacher in terms of their approach or their presence in the class?
I think, I mean, you had mentioned at one occasion that humor is very important. And I have to say, it is very, very important. Not to ever use it so that people are being put down or anything, but to have a communal joke and everybody laugh, or I make a mistake and everybody can, chuckle, and they're not the only ones making the mistake. And the other thing is respect. I think that, and maybe with patience, but patience and respect, so that you're patient because you respect what they're learning and how hard it is. And all of the times, they didn't not go to school because they didn't want to. They were not able to go to school. Money problems. They're a woman, no school for women. They're in a ethnic minority that doesn't have schools available to them. They're in the middle of a war. I mean, so many really horrible reasons why they're not going to school. So I think I always just respect the diligence that they have in doing the work and the appreciation that they have. And I have to show respect for that. And and
Yeah, I agree. That's lots of really great soft skills. So patience, respect, humor.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
imagine and adjustment. You know, they come to school, they have a myriad of problems in their own life. They're remaking their life in Canada, totally different than their home country, with hardly any skills like speaking, listening, reading, writing. And yet, I don't find that my students are grumpy or complaining or, you know, they do their best to be very optimistic and very happy in school and nice with each other and kind, very kind to
Hmm.
each other. And you just gotta respect that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I like the idea of bringing their culture, like allowing them to kind of bring their language and their culture and their past experiences into the class as well. And
Mhm.
it's tricky with limited language skills, but
Yeah.
you know, and sort of tying that together with humor, like, when I try to learn a little bit of their language, I think they appreciate that at the same
Yeah.
time as they think it's funny because I'm not doing it perfectly, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and um I think they appreciate that I'm making an effort to learn some of their language,
Yeah.
and things like having potlucks where they can bring their food from their country, or that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
being able to share their background. So I think um,
Yeah.
that makes for, I think, like, trying to make a welcoming environment, I
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah.
is kind of uh, so that if they enjoy being, I kind of feel like if they enjoy being there,
Yes.
they
They
will
come.
learn better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to
They
have,
will
like,
come and they will be relaxed and open to learning. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
And they don't have, well, they don't have any experience with school, but they come with a fear
yeah,
of school. Not us particularly, but are they going to succeed? And yeah, and so we have to be mindful of that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I also have started learning a few when we have a potluck, the names of the dishes, and everybody really, because I've had several Afghan students now, I can name, oh yeah, that's Kabuli, or whatever.
Mhm,
Oh wow, and
mhm.
yeah, yeah. Mm.
Yeah, wonderful. And so what about learning strategies? And so this is something I think also that maybe new instructors, it's easy to gloss over because we were taught learning strategies really early on in our schooling, usually. Um, and and we might forget that students who haven't had a lot of experience with school might not have these. So, for example, like using a calendar, or being able to organize their binder,
Yeah.
or not that we're expecting students to take notes at this level, but even to
Mhm.
just note something down. If you tell
Yeah.
them, you
Yeah.
have an appointment with the teacher tomorrow at 10 o'clock, you
Yeah.
better put that somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So that you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
And so, so this type of stuff has to be explicitly taught to literacy learners. I mean, we can't just expect that they know how to organize a binder if they've never done it.
Yeah.
So we have to teach them how. How do you approach these
Mm.
things?
Uh, I don't think I'm very successful on the binder thing, but my approach is this, that everything goes in their binder, all of their notes and their assessments. Those are the two things. The work that we do in classroom, including their homework, goes into the binder. That means it's important stuff. And the back of the binder is for their tests and their assessments or whatever. And yeah, so I have organized it as simply as I can for and remember, I'm foundation, so I'm doing that for them. And because I was doing two binders before, and it was just too much. And then I'm trying to teach them, holes go on the left side, the top goes here, and you know, and we do that. So we finish the paper, everybody puts it in the binder, and I don't do the hole punches for them. They have to learn how to do that. So,
Oh.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I think it started out because I wasn't putting it on because I wasn't remembering or knowing how to do it. And then I realized, okay, yeah, so everybody knows that hole punch and they do it themselves or their friend helps them or whatever. But that is at least, I would say, 5 minute. There's always a 5 minute put it in your binder uh, after every single activity that we do. But say, for example, you do the cards, you have no papers. So, we maybe have probably two papers that we've worked on. They go in the binder with the time for them to do it. Yeah. Yep. So that's the binder. I feel like have a better system for the calendar. We're lucky enough to have calendars, the same calendar for all the students. In the past, I was so happy that I'd gone around to all these places and gotten all of these different calendars. And then it came to teaching them, and everybody's calendar is different. The number where the month is placed, it's either at the top or at the bottom or along the side or whatever. So having the same kind of calendar is, I think, essential, or it makes it very much more helpful. And also, the first time I gathered up those calendars, so proud of myself, back in January, this is what we're going to do. And I went through the whole calendar, like each month, how many days, and then the next month, And honestly, the whole class was so shell-shocked. They didn't know what was going on. And they were just like, oh my God. And I thought to myself at break, okay, maybe I'll just scrap this whole calendar thing. And then I thought, no, the calendar is really important. I just have to take it slowly. I have to just
Break it
break
down
it
piece
down.
by piece.
It's in
Yeah.
fact, we went through the calendar 5 times. The first time, and just turning the pages in a different way than we usually do
Right.
it.
From bottom to top
Yeah,
instead of a book, which is
yeah,
right to
exactly.
left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so doing that, then discussing the picture, because everybody's looking at the picture. So round 1, let's look at the picture. And you can do it. Yeah. So usually I go through that if we're doing the whole calendar. If we're just doing the month of March, just the food I'm looking at first. And then we're at the same time teaching the days of the week and the months. So then, finding those days on the calendar, because when you think about it, this is something we don't think about either. It's quite a complex tool.
Yeah, it's a table,
Yeah,
right? So you're reading up
it is.
and down
Yeah.
and side to
You're reading this
side.
way, you're reading
Yeah.
that way, you're reading that way. And so, the day, where is the month and how do we spell that month? And what are the days? Where are they? And then where is, where's today? Where is September 3rd? And then everybody finding that. Oh, and counting out the days. I do that. It's you. I might have thought it was boring for them, but it's so essential because it's following this way and then coming back here and going this way and coming back here and going that way. And so it's showing the pattern of how we're reading it. And yeah, yeah. So doing that, and yeah. And so I really do all of those kind of, the first 1 or 2, 3 days of the month. I do the calendar. They enter in special days on the calendar. Sometimes we do our own calendar that we can take home, which, especially in a busy month like, say, April, when there's Easter or March break and all of that stuff, then we do it together, their own copy, and so that we can put those activities in. Getting the idea that one block is one day. And yeah. And then just reading, just general reading. What day is October 8th? And then they have to use that method of, oh, Wednesday is, this is a Wednesday, whatever. And
Yeah,
I
so
do it
much that
all
you can
year.
do with the calendar, right?
Yeah,
That's really a
yeah,
lot there.
yeah, yeah. And before that, learning the months, learning the days of the week. This is an activity I usually do on the day that I'm doing calendars, i.e. the beginning of the month. So every student has an envelope like this, which says dates. And in there, they have in pink the days of the week, and in orange, the months. Can't see those, but the months. And I have these little cutouts, which are like 1 to 31. And I have the years. I have some years. I'm now only doing the 2000s, but I have these. And everybody gets this so that they can, the months are more difficult. So, yeah. So you have your own paper to help you out. So the first thing is everybody going through and organizing them from January to December, from Sunday to Saturday, and the numbers as well. And then, so all of that is on their desk. It is a manipulative thing. There's a lot of talking. People are helping each other. And then they're reading to their partner, they're reading to me. And then we will do two things we could do after is the listening activity. So they have all of these things. And I would say November in the envelope. So they have to find November and put it in the envelope. And you can do it like that. You can almost do any of those activities in the reverse. And I always say, this is for listening. And so they do that. That's one thing to do with once you have everything out in front of the student. The other way to do it is to make a dictation of the dates. So that say, all right, so the date is Monday, October 5. And it's not the date today, it's just a date. And 2005. So then I said, okay, so Monday, find Monday, put it on your thing. Find October, put it on then find the number 10, put that on. Find the year 2005. And then we read it, people read it, whatever. And then we go on to number 2. And really doing 12 is quite lengthy. So, maybe I do 5 or 6, and then we're reading them together. And then the same thing, putting in back in their envelopes. All right, Monday, October, whatever, in your envelope. And yeah. So always I find that there is the two sides of the activity.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And that would be a great skill building for eventually students being able to read like appointment cards and things like that too.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and that is good for many levels, because there's the helping involved, and the one person may not be able to collect the date, but other people are helping them. And yeah. And of course, good ones go faster.
Yeah, I love those activities, and I approach it pretty similarly myself. The only difference with the binders is I do have 2 binders. I have one for their everyday worksheets, so they can take it home and review it for homework. And then in their PBLA binder, I use that as a way to, and like you say, like anytime I hand back an assessment, it takes 5 to 10 minutes for them to file it in the correct place, because we go through it step by step. So it's like, everybody go get your binder and open it. And then, for instance, like, okay, this is a speaking assessment. Can you find the tab that has the S on it? And then they look and they find the S, and then they have to open it, right? And then they also have to move over any papers that are already in that section, because in English, the paper goes at the back. And in a lot of other cultures, the new paper goes at the front. So I'm always repeating that as well, like move over all the papers, and the English paper goes at the back. And so they file it in there. And I find that just by every time I hand back an assessment, I do that. And eventually they start being able to do it
Yeah.
on their own. But it does take probably, depending on the student, but it can take a whole year
Yeah.
for a student to be able to file their papers correctly in the PBLA binder on their own, right?
You're
On their
making
own.
me think I'm going to review my whole binder situation this year. And I had done 2 before. I just found that we were concentrating more on the paper, the binder with the worksheets, and not really on the PBLA binder. And
Yeah, well,
but
there's so many ways of approaching it, right?
yeah,
There's lots of different ways to do it. And I love what you do with the calendars, to use an actual calendar. And I might try to switch to that this year, actually, because what I've been doing is just photocopying like a free printable calendar from the internet at the
mhm,
beginning of each month. I hand it out and we go
mhm,
through it together, projected on the whiteboard. And I'm like, okay, which days do we have school, and we'll put
yeah,
a little happy face on all the days that have school, and which days are no school, and we put X's on those ones. and
mm,
and then we note any special days, like if we have a test or a holiday or
mm,
something happening, a party or something, we'll write it in there as well. And then they put it in their binder, and I get them to take a picture of it. If they have a
oh
phone,
yeah,
they
yeah,
can take a picture of it and have it on their phone as
correct.
well, which is kind of
Yeah,
nice. But I like the idea. I like using the real calendars,
mhm,
where then
mhm,
they have the whole year all in one place.
yeah,
And I like the flipping,
yeah,
learning how to manipulate the
yeah.
real world calendar as well.
But
I
I
mean, it's
often do both. So
mm,
when I do the calendar, I'm doing it for 2 or 3 days at the beginning of the month. And so I have several different activities involving, months, days, whatever, the calendar, and then the actual calendar. I have them take that home and put it on the fridge so they know those things. But, you know, because I think that they need to know the calendar, the dates, days of the
yes,
week,
it's
whatever.
so, so, so important,
Yeah, so
because you need
important,
that for
so
taking the
used, so
bus and
real
going
world.
to the doctor, going to
Yeah,
the social worker.
yeah,
Basically, anything that they're
yeah,
doing in life, they're going to need to know how to be there on the right day at the right time in
yeah,
the right place.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you say, read those doctor cards.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is an important thing. I find doing it over the year is, good because it's repetitive, but it's not daily repetitive. 3 days you're working on that, and then you don't work on it for another, 20 days or whatever.
Yeah.
The thing I also do is we write either together or I write a story of that month. So, say March. Uh, it is a new month. It is March. February is finished. And then March is, yeah, that's a hard one. Is it winter? Is it summer? Is it winter or is it spring? And then maybe a little bit about the weather. Is sometimes raining, sometimes snowing, and then special days. And they're, getting the idea, but in a different format, same information, different format. And then they type that. And so that's reading it together, and then they're typing it in the computer room, in the
Yeah.
computer lab.
And that can also be extended to, like, checking the weather
Yeah,
app on their phone, for
yeah,
example, to see
yeah,
what the weather's going to be tomorrow, or later
yeah,
on in the week for a picnic, or what do they
yeah,
need to wear when they're coming to school, based on the
yeah,
weather and stuff like that. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it all ties in together.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So what advice do you have for a new literacy teacher who is teaching literacy for the first time? So let's say their first
Mm,
day, it's September.
yeah.
Now, if there's somebody who is just starting out in this profession, is walking into a literacy class for the first time, what kind of advice would you
Oh,
have for them?
Yeah, so tough, right? You remember those first days? Didn't know what was going on. So I would say, first of all, really pay attention to the font. So for all of your writing, the font and the density of the writing on the page. And so you have to really reduce that. It has to be very clear, and yeah, and not very much writing on everyone. And I think you will, and I did, and you probably did, make a lot of mistakes until you figure out what could be the glitch that you didn't think of. It seemed obvious to you when you were doing it at home, and then you come into school, and your students are like, and see it a different way. Um, yeah. So I have these to sort of check how everybody's learning their um, capital letters and small letters matching. I have 3 pages, turns out, and so it's made up of six. Each page is 6 blocks, and there's one block, and there's the letter D, and then there are, maybe, let's say, B and G and F, and D, and so they have to connect big D and little d together. So I thought that was pretty clear. And actually, what they did was they took that big D and they traveled all over the page and found every single day, little D, on
Oh,
the
in
whole page.
because there was
Yeah.
instructions and
Yeah, you're
other
just
labels and
matching. So,
things.
okay, we're matching, this D, and down here there's a D, and up here there's a D, and
Right,
whatever.
because if it says date, then there's a D at the top of the page
Yeah.
too, right?
And then the
Yeah.
letter S, and they're finding every S on the paper. There's lines all
Uh-huh.
over the place. So I thought, okay, so it didn't occur to me. That
Uh-huh.
was, that was that. And so then the next day, I revised it so it was a little more clear. I really definitively, and I defined the box more clearly,
Mhm.
and put number 1 and number 2 and number 3. So 6 boxes. So then I'm saying, look in box number 1, and do you see you see big D, you see little d, here, here, here. And so with more explanation of what it is. And, there were still mistakes. But anyways, what I mean is, it's probably, that happened to me last year. So there's going to be always these things
It's
that,
such a great example though, right, of things they followed the
yeah, and they
instructions
were
really
all
well,
doing the same thing.
but the result was not anything we would have imagined, and this is such a great example of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
gaps,
yeah,
the things
and
that we take for granted
yeah.
as,
Yeah, like,
English
so keep in
speakers
the
in
box,
this culture.
that's
Yeah,
what we would think.
yeah.
And you have 3 choices, whatever, but no. And so that is the other thing that I always do is I scan that paper, and I have it on the whiteboard, and we do it together. Maybe they don't have their paper yet. That keeps everybody focused on the whiteboard, and then we do it all together as a group on the board. And then at the beginning, I would leave the board on, and then they would do their own paper. But maybe later on, you could turn it off, and then they do it themselves. And so it's always going to take you more time. It, especially even just the process of doing it, you
Mhm.
know, like that matching thing that, they're learning that. What would you call that? They're learning that worksheet
Yeah,
formulas.
like, though I would say that's almost like a kind of learning strategy. I don't know if it would be called a learning strategy, but that kind of thing where, matching, draw a line
Yeah.
to match, that's something that we've done
So we
in
don't
schools in
think it's
Canada
something
for
we
so
have to
long. We
learn.
just think it's a given,
Yeah.
but it's not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. So, anyways, cut yourself a lot of slack. You're probably, all of us are, we, we err. We didn't see it the way, we didn't interpret the way they're interpreting it.
Yeah. Or
Then you just
sometimes you just
redo it.
forget, right? Like,
Yeah.
even though I've been teaching literacy for quite a few years now, I just, I had them copy something last year and I was wondering why all their A's looked funny and their G's looked like S's that were not on the line. And then I realized I hadn't adjusted the font. It was
Mhm.
still, I don't remember which font it was, but it wasn't, it wasn't one that had the sort of printed A.
Yeah.
That we typically
Yeah.
use, and the
Yeah.
G was kind of all squiggly, and
Yeah.
so that's, yeah, I think as new teachers, it's something is so easy to forget or to gloss over, but
Yeah.
that when you see them copying in that way, we realize that we don't actually write that way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
But they more that in addition, the important piece for the teacher is to don't be discouraged by these things.
yeah,
This is your learning, your practice, and you make mistakes.
exactly.
Or I wouldn't even call it a mistake, a miscalculation. And so cut yourself a lot of slack, say, yep, that didn't work. Wow, would have never thought that this is how they would see it. And I
Yeah,
just, just have a laugh about it,
yeah, and it's a teaching practice, not a
Yeah,
teaching perfect
yeah,
anyway.
yeah, yeah. And I think
So
with literacy, you really have to do that because we don't. So if we had a level 5 speaker from, you know, uh, Spain, we know how to learn. We know what they know, and the connections are easy.
yeah,
It's
because
all about
the
the
same
letter.
alphabet as
Yeah,
us,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
yeah.
And how to do those worksheets, that's a given. The thing with literacy is those things are not givens. And
Mhm.
and sometimes I think we could say, oh, it's not worth doing. But I think, anyways, that it's two things we're teaching. We're teaching the material and we're teaching the process, how this idea works, matching, that idea, for example. And it's worth it. And the first time it's going to be not great. But gradually they're going to get better and better. And just think, we are teaching them to succeed at the next higher level when the expectation is they know how to do those
Mhm.
kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in life too. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a former student from my school that it was not my student, it was another literacy teacher student, but she came back and she said, she wanted to say thank you for teaching her numbers because she now had a job as cleaning hotel rooms. And she said, I would have never been able to do that job before because I wasn't able to read the numbers on the rooms and she wouldn't know which room to clean. But because she
Yeah.
had come to school and learned numbers, she was successful at doing her job and she came back to just tell us that.
Yeah.
And so it's something, it's like can be life changing, these skills,
Yes. And
really.
think of what a great job you did, you
It
know?
wasn't me, my
But
student. It was
yeah,
another,
but
it was
the
another teaching
teacher and
student.
the
Yeah.
school, think of the door that's opened. Just
Yeah.
numbers. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a student who spoke really well, looked really modern and everything. Um, Turned out she had never been to school. She really didn't know how to write her name or read her name or whatever, but she had pretty good English skills. So she got herself a job at Sensplex after the hockey game, cleaning the theater.
Mhm.
And she said, but teacher, I need time because they had to sign in, say 9:30.
Oh.
They had to write the
So she
time,
could
but
write her
then
name, but she needed
and
to learn how to
she
write
needed to
the time.
do her name, she
Mm,
needed to do the time in and the time out. So really, she needed to know how to do time, but she also needed how to write those numbers.
mhm.
And those were only the numbers, 1 to 10. And another student who needed to know how to get onto her bus. Can you
Mhm.
believe it? Her bus was 96. Such a
Uh-huh.
yeah. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's why, a big success story in is literacy is being able to read the rooms, being able to take the bus, being able to write the time for your jobs. And so we have to realize that we're a different group than the literate teachers and students. We're doing a different thing. Teaching
Yeah.
still, but different things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we're kind of starting to run out of
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
we just had one last question before we go. What do you think? Like, if you could change anything about how literacy is taught in this day and age, what would you change about it, and why?
Anything?
Yeah. Like, if you could, in a perfect world, what would that look like?
I find the constraints of real world tasks is very difficult because it's hard to do as many tasks as are required, and we're not getting any recognition in that of what we have taught. So you can feel like, oh my God, it's November and I have, like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 things. But, you have many other things that you've been teaching that lead to those things, but it just takes a long time. And so it's, but to be honest, people do have recognition of that. And so it's not like you're being chastised or anything, but I find it hard and sometimes demoralizing to the literacy teacher because, oh my God, I haven't done anything. I don't
But
know.
you've really done so much in terms of
Yeah,
all the skill building
yeah,
that you've
yeah.
done.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you have any?
Yeah. I would like to see more hands-on stuff, and this might not be possible necessarily in government-funded programs in schools, but if maybe it would be a nonprofit or some other type of organization that I'd love to see more hands-on stuff where literacy students are not necessarily sitting in chairs in the classroom with paper, things like, at a community center, maybe working on a community garden and
Mhm,
selling the produce or something like that. Because there's a
mhm.
lot of skills. Not
Yeah,
only are they integrating in the community and using their language to speak with real people
yeah,
out in the environment, but they're also doing something useful, and then they're learning so much just by what are
doing.
the following instructions and
Yeah,
counting money and
yeah.
counting boxes or
You're
whatever.
right
Like, there's
about.
so many skills that could come
Yeah.
out of doing
Mhm.
hands-on stuff. So I would love to see that. Some it would be a massive undertaking, and require probably quite a bit of funding, but I would love to see literacy students being able to, because they come with a lot of skills too, right?
Yeah,
We've got people who know about farming and textiling and
yeah,
sewing, and
yeah.
they come with a lot of hands-on skills, and that can be actually um, they can feel like they're contributing and sharing, teaching,
And
and using their skills right away.
yeah, yeah, and using their skill to the high level that they are.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
that would be
I'd love
great.
to see students learning
Mm,
English and, sharing their sewing skills, or learning English while they're tending a community garden and selling giving,
yeah,
maybe donating the produce to the food bank or
yeah,
selling it in the
yeah,
farmer's market or something like that, where
yeah,
they're integrating who they were before they came here
yeah,
with, like, a new way of being in a new country. I would love to see that someday.
yeah. And in general, say in the area of getting a job, the reality is that everybody needs a resume now,
Mhm.
and for any job at all. And there is not really, maybe in other centers, but in Ottawa, not really a lot focused on the literacy student. So if they don't have family that, or a teacher that can help them write their resume, they don't have that kind of service, which, say, a higher level has many more organizations to help them get a job You know.
Right, because
Oh,
even to go, for example, to an employment center, you still need
yeah,
to be able to count your money for the bus and take the right bus to the right address at the right time for your
yeah,
appointment. And all
yeah,
of that
yeah,
requires so many skills,
yeah.
just getting there yourself there.
And even just
Mm.
doing the phone thing, press one for this, press one for that, whatever, and maybe doing it in English and French. It's really, yeah,
Yeah.
really hard.
Not to mention the technology, right? Resumes have
Oh,
to
yeah.
be on the computer. And I think that might be a good topic if we ever decide to do another
Another
podcast.
one. Yes,
Maybe
for
we could
sure.
talk about this, which is another whole
Yeah,
ball of wax, with
yeah,
teaching literacy is also teaching those technology skills. But
yeah.
I think we'll leave that for another day.
I think so. Yeah. It was very fun sharing all yeah, my thoughts and my years of experience and everything. I
Oh,
appreciate
yeah.
the
Thank you so
opportunity.
much for taking the
Yeah,
time to share this with us. I know I've appreciated it, and I hope that some other literacy teachers and new teachers will benefit
yeah.
from it as well. And yeah, maybe we can do a second episode at some
Yeah. All
point.
right. Okay. Thanks, Joanne.
Okay, thanks, Donna. Bye.
Bye.